The wolf should have been dead. That's what Leo kept telling himself the morning he found it sitting at the edge of the frozen creek behind his grandfather's cabin. Massive pale gray, one ear torn and scarred, watching him with yellow eyes that didn't look afraid of anything. Leo was 9 years old and holding a thermos of hot chocolate he'd planned to drink alone because his grandfather had passed 3 weeks earlier and the cabin still smelled like him, and Leo didn't know what to do with that. He didn't run. He couldn't explain why. The wolf didn't move either. They stayed like that for almost 4 minutes. Leo counted because he needed something to count, until his mom called him in for breakfast, and the wolf turned and walked back into the pines without a sound. He didn't tell anyone, not because he thought they wouldn't believe him, because it felt like the one thing that was only his. His grandfather had been the kind of man who didn't talk much, but always knew when you needed someone to sit beside you. He'd built the cabin in northern Montana in his 30s, raised Leo's mother there, and spent the last decade of his life teaching Leo how to read animal tracks in mud, how to identify trees by their bark in winter, how to be still in the woods without going restless inside. "The forest doesn't owe you anything," he used to say, "but if you're patient, it'll show you things." Leo had thought that was just old man wisdom, the kind of thing you nod at when you're 9. After the wolf, he wasn't so sure. He came back to the creek the next morning, and the morning after that. Each time he brought the thermos, sat on the same flat rock, and waited. The wolf didn't come back that week. His mother packed up the cabin and drove them home to Billings before Christmas. But Leo kept thinking about those yellow eyes. Not menacing, not wild. Something else, something he didn't have a word for yet. His mom noticed he'd stopped talking about his grandfather. She thought it was grief going quiet. She wasn't wrong exactly. It was grief, just pointed somewhere new. The following December, Leo begged his mother to spend winter break at the cabin. She hesitated. The pipes needed work, the drive was long, and she hadn't been back since the funeral. But she saw something in his face that wasn't just stubbornness, so she went. On the second morning, Leo woke before sunrise and walked to the creek alone. The wolf was already there, same torn ear, same pale coat, same yellow eyes. It sat on the opposite bank like it had simply been waiting for him to come back and finish whatever that first morning had started. Leo sat down on his rock and opened his thermos. Steam curled up in the cold air. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from something he couldn't name yet. The wolf took one step toward the creek, then stopped. Leo noticed something then that he'd missed the year before. Around the wolf's left foreleg, half hidden by fur, was a faded orange band, the kind wildlife researchers used for tracking. Someone had tagged this animal, someone had touched it before. It wasn't purely wild. It was somewhere in between, like a word that belongs to 2 languages at once. He pulled out the small notebook his grandfather had given him the summer before he died and wrote, "It came back." He didn't know why that felt like proof of something. It just did. Leo spent the next 2 years reading everything he could about wolves in Montana. He learned about the reintroduction programs, about pack behavior, about how a lone wolf, called a disperser, sometimes traveled hundreds of miles searching for a new territory or a new pack. He found a wildlife biologist named Dr. Rena Vasquez through a school research project and emailed her a description of the wolf, including the orange band. She responded the same day. The wolf had been tagged as part of a study 6 years earlier, she told him. It was a female. She'd lost her pack to disease in the mountains east of Glacier and had been moving solo ever since. The researchers had nearly given up tracking her. Her signal had gone quiet for over a year. "Where did you see her?" Dr. Vasquez asked. Leo told her. She went quiet for a moment, then said the creek location was nearly 40 miles from where they'd last recorded the wolf's position. "She's been ranging further than we expected," she said. "That kind of isolation does things to animals. To be honest, I didn't think she was still alive." That sentence sat in Leo's chest for days. He was 12 now. He understood more than he had at 9. He understood that surviving alone for years wasn't the same as being okay. He understood it more than he wanted to admit. He told his mom he wanted to go back to the cabin for Christmas. She didn't ask why anymore. She just started packing. The wolf came on the 3rd morning that year, and she was limping. Leo saw it immediately. A hitch in her right hind leg, subtle but real. He sat completely still and watched her make her way to the water's edge and drink. She looked thinner than before. Her ribs weren't visible, but her face had a gauntness to it that hadn't been there at 9 or 10. He'd brought Dr. Vasquez with him that year. Not to the creek. He wasn't ready for that. But to the cabin. He described what he saw when he came back inside, every detail, and she listened without interrupting. "She may have been injured by another predator," Dr. Vasquez said carefully. "Or a trap. It's hard to say without seeing her." She paused. "Leo, she keeps coming back to this location specifically. Wolves don't do that without a reason." "What kind of reason?" Dr. Vasquez looked at him for a moment. "Your grandfather, what was he like out here?" Leo blinked. "He knew the woods." "Did he ever leave food out? Near the water?" Leo went still. He remembered. Winter mornings when he was very small, before he was old enough to follow his grandfather outside. He'd watch through the kitchen window as the old man walked to the creek with something in his hand. Leo had thought it was nothing, a ritual, old habit. He went to the shed that afternoon and found, behind a rusted shelf, 3 years' worth of empty cans of sardines, stacked neatly, like a record kept by someone who didn't think anyone would ever look. His grandfather had known this wolf for years before Leo ever saw her. Leo sat with that a long time. He thought about his grandfather teaching him to be still, to be patient, to let the forest show him things. He'd always thought those were lessons about nature. Now he understood they were also instructions, a quiet handoff, passed without explanation, trusting that Leo would figure out the rest when he was ready. He wasn't going to leave food. Dr. Vasquez was clear about that. Dependency on humans, however gentle, could hurt the wolf more than help her. But she helped Leo contact a wildlife recovery team that began monitoring the area that spring. The wolf's injury, it turned out, was healing on its own. Leo was 16 now. He'd been coming back every winter for 7 years. He sat at the creek on a bright December morning, his notebook open on his knee, the thermos on the rock beside him. The wolf came out of the pines and stopped at the water's edge. She was heavier than last year, strong-looking. The limp was gone. She looked at him the same way she always had, not like he was a threat, not like he was a source of food, like he was something familiar in a world that had given her very little familiar. Leo didn't move. He breathed slowly. After a while, the wolf waded partway across the shallow creek, closer than she'd ever come, and lowered her head to drink. He wrote in his notebook, "She trusts me now. I think Grandpa always knew she would." He looked up at the tree line, where the pines held snow on their branches, and the morning light came through in long, pale angles. He said quietly, "I get it now." The wolf lifted her head, looked at him once more, then walked back into the trees, unhurried, disappearing into the white and green silence of the Montana winter. Leo closed his notebook and finished his hot chocolate. It was the best he'd tasted in years.